Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our very special President's Day edition of Tim at 10. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I am super excited about our session this morning. It's such an incredible, important topic for all of us to dive into, for us to have an open mind, for us to be willing to practice some new skills. Just that willingness to see children with a different set of eyes. I hope that this information today is going to be very helpful for you, to help you with your journey, to help support these kids, to help you grow professionally. It's a lot of information today, so I hope you're ready. You got your pen and your paper, you got your professional development journals ready to take notes. I know that we've got quite a few schools that are participating this morning with a large group of people that are watching this together. Thank you all so much for doing this and making this commitment to this topic. I hope that you engage with each other after we are done with this session and have open-ended conversations about the material, bounce information off of each other, and just really make the most of it right here. Oh yeah, I see one of our schools down in Central Texas right now. They've got me on the big screen. She says, "Woo, I've always wanted to be on the big screen." So that's awesome right there. Good morning. We got a lot of people here. All right, well, we're gonna go ahead and get this party started this morning. So the first thing I want y'all to do, if you're willing, let's just put our hands on our chest like this right here. And let's take a deep breath in through our nose. And exhale. One more time, relax those shoulders. Exhale. One more time, relaxing those shoulders, relax those eyes, relax the jaw. Very good. We're going to have a lot of conversations today. Some of the conversations that we have today may not be easy for you to hear, but it is important information for us to discuss. We're going to talk a lot today about adult willingness and just that willingness to see things different, to do things different. That's going to be really important for you. So throughout the day, when you find it necessary to hit the pause button, your internal pause button, and take that deep breath so that you can stay calm and composed, we can keep the higher centers of our brain activated, so that we can learn this information and really see things differently. That's going to be really important for you right here. And I also just want to give the disclaimer, the warning that some of the information that we discussed today, you may go down a personal rabbit hole, and that's totally normal, whether it's with yourself or whether it's your own personal child. That's okay, because sometimes when you take this information down a little bit of a personal rabbit hole, you at that point, you make that connection right there. Hang on just one second. So again, that might happen from time to time. Totally understandable right there. All right, so let's go ahead and kind of start moving on right here. Before we get started, just some housekeeping tips for you, some training tips so that we can all be successful with today's training. Make sure, again, that you are ready to take notes so that you can discuss a lot of these practices and processes with your leadership team at your school, with your co-workers, with your peers. We want you to build that professional development journal. Have lots of good information right there. This training today is an updated version of the training that I've had on the website for a couple of years now called Supporting Children with Special Needs. This is an updated version. The title is a little bit different. It is now Supporting Children with Special Care Needs to match the language that's in the Child Care Minimum Standards. So there is a new TechPeds training ID for this particular course. So this course has been approved by the Texas Early Childhood Professional Development System. So that's going to be helpful for those of you that are part of Texas Rising Star. And of course, moving forward with state child care licensing and minimum standards. Make sure that your personal TechPeds ID is entered on your Tim the Trainer portal before you complete your assessment later on this morning. That way, whenever you complete your assessment and you get your certificate of training, your certificate will be uploaded into your TechPeds account. You will not have to do that manually, as long as your personal TechPeds ID number is entered on your Tim the Trainer portal before you complete the assessment. But that's going to be really helpful for you right there. As always, if you have any questions about the training today, you can call us, you can email us. If you go to our website, timthetrainer.com, in the upper right-hand corner, you can message us straight through the website with any questions that you have about the material today. Or if you are needing more information beyond the scope of the training material, once again, message us, call us, email us. We are here for you. One other quick reminder, per the Child Care Minimum Standards, training must be completed in a reasonable amount of time. This is something that licensing is really cracking down on. So the best way of looking at this, when they say that training must be completed in a reasonable amount of time, the total number of clock hours of training that you complete in a single day cannot exceed the total number of hours worked in that day. All right. So if you work an 8-hour day, you can't complete 16 hours of training. All right. That's not reasonable. If there's only 24 hours in a day, you can't complete 32 hours of training in a single day. That's not reasonable. And childcare licensing is going to kick back on that. And then you're also setting your school up for wage and hour issues. So we want to make sure everyone is in compliance with both regulatory agencies. This is something that you're going to need to manage and stay on top of. Professional development is not a race. It is not about checking the boxes and just getting your hours. It's about growing professionally. It's about making yourself and your classroom and your school better. That's what it's all about right there. Man, I just love all these people telling me good morning and telling me where you're from. So awesome. We got a great group here this morning. Super exciting. All right, here are the learning objectives that I have for this morning's class. We're going to start off kind of talking about the requirements for serving children with special care needs that's outlined in the Child Care Minimum Standards and the expectations under the Americans with Disability Act. Y'all may remember that in the last 18 months, we have had several amendments made to the Child Care Minimum Standards in regards to serving children with special care needs. So I really want to make sure everyone understands what that language is all about and what the expectations are, how it relates to the Americans with Disability Act, and how it's bringing some of you into this conversation when you may have thought you were excluded from this conversation. So there was some intention with how they did this right here. I'll explain that whenever we get to that part of the training. We're going to talk a lot about the characteristics of children with autism and how to be proactive when making reasonable accommodations when indicators are observed. A large portion of today's training is going to be focused on children with autism, mainly because that is the most common special care need that we see in early education. We're going to talk a little bit about hyperactive disorders and children with ADD, because that is the second most common special care need that we see. We'll talk about some other things as well, but you're going to notice a big focus on those particular topics. And then we'll talk a lot today about how we can practice skills needed to support children with special care needs, and the need for adult willingness. And I'm going to put a heavy focus on that adult willingness today. This is probably one of the biggest struggles that we've seen this for probably 10 or 15 years, but just in the last 5 years, I would say, this has been one of our biggest obstacles, is the adult willingness. Is the adult in the classroom, are they willing to do things different to meet the individual child's needs? And are they willing to see that behavior is an opportunity to teach, that behavior is an opportunity to lend a new skill, all right? So as long as the adult willingness is there, you're going to be amazed at the progress that you can make with the child, all right? But as long as we see that child as an issue, as long as we see that child as an obstacle, as a distraction, you know, what we focus on, we get more of. And if that's all we're seeing, then that's all you're going to get. All right, so we have to shift our focus. We have to practice positive intent and look at the opportunity that is in front of us right here. All right, before I move forward, let me just go ahead and say this. For those of you that this might be your first time doing one of my Facebook Live events, welcome. If it is your first time, I'm super happy that you're here. You're going to complete an assessment at the end of today's video where you will answer some questions about the training material. And that's how you're going to get credit for the course, and you'll get your training certificate after you complete that assessment. There is no need to put your name, your personal name and the name of your school in the comment section. We're not going to be looking at that. It's irrelevant. It has nothing to do with your presence in class today. So I see a lot of you putting in your name in the comment section. Hi, but I really don't need that. Okay? Because your attendance is going to be based on your assessments that you're completing today. Also, for those of you that this is your first time joining me on one of these live events, you're going to notice there on the screen there's some assessment questions. Because I want you to be successful and I want you to grow as a professional, I'm going to give you a heads up on a lot of the assessment questions that you're going to see at the end of the course. So you might want to pay attention to what's in those bubbles down there at the bottom of the screen, because you're going to see those again. All right. So that would be helpful for you as well. Okay. All right. So I know that a lot of you are eager to get to the how can we support children in the classroom? What are some processes that we can use in the classroom? I know that you're eager to get to that information, and I'm eager to give it to you, all right? But before we get there, we have to have some basic understanding of supporting children with special care needs first, all right? So we're going to cover some other information before we get to the actual practices, because you've got it. It's like building a house, right? We got to lay the foundation first, and then we got to put the studs up, and then we got to put the roof up, and then we can get to everything inside. All right? So, everything that we're going to talk about today is going to be based on an adult-first approach. All right? It's an adult-first, child-second model. Pretty much all of the trainings that I do, all of the skills that we practice, all right, is pretty much built on an adult first, child second model. So, you know, you can think about it, you know, flying in an airplane. And whenever you're in an airplane, before you take off, they do that little safety briefing. And they always tell you, in the event of a loss of cabin pressure, an oxygen mask will fall in front of you. And what do they always say? You've got to put your oxygen mask on first before you can assist that child. And y'all, that's exactly what this is about today. All right? Before you can be successful supporting that child in your classroom, the adult has to be regulated. You have to be composed first. You have to be in the higher centers of your brain. All right? You have to have your executive skills have to be activated before you can assist that child. And I understand that this is hard. This can be stressful. It can be frustrating when you've got a child with a special care need in your classroom, but you also have 14 other children that you're responsible for. I get it. All right? I understand it. But we have to look at the big picture right here. And when you have a conflict in the classroom, okay, whether it's two children having a typical conflict in the classroom, whether you've got aggressive behavior that's built on defiance, or you've got aggressive behavior that's built off of a special care need, all right? When you've got that conflict going on in the classroom, you might have one or two children that are in conflict, that are in distress, that have a perceived threat of danger, but every other child in that classroom, okay, is also asking, are we safe? All right? So it is very important for you as the adult to be the safekeeper. And you've got to download calm, not just to the one or two children that are in conflict, but you have to download calm to the rest of the class. You have to let all of the other children know that they are safe. And the way you're going to do that is by practicing composure, right? It's your composure that's going to let everyone know that they're safe. So, we talk about being a star. And, I modify this when we talk about supporting children with special care needs. I'm going to modify what STAR stands for. Typically, STAR stands for smile, take a deep breath, and relax. But for the sake of this training, we're going to modify it. And it's going to be stop, take a deep breath, and relax. And you do this before you speak, before you act. All right? And you affirm yourself. You say to yourself, I am safe. Keep breathing. I can handle this. I can help this child with their problem. You've got to open your heart to the moment. Let go of your beliefs that this is about you, and be willing to recognize that the child is calling for help, and send that positive energy out to that child. Send them well wishes. All right. Later on in today's session, we're going to talk about being a Q-tip, and you've got to practice the Q-tip approach when working with children with special care needs. This is not about you. It's about the child. So we got to quit taking it personal. All right? Quit taking it personal. And you have to remind yourself, this is not happening to you. This is happening in front of you. You are safe. Keep breathing. You can handle this. All right? So, I threw this slide up here at the very beginning because I really wanted y'all to kind of understand that as we continue to go through this material, that adult first approach is going to be so important for y'all to hang on to. All right, So again, I just want to have a little bit of some reflection time before we get started with our material. Because, whenever we do trainings like this, we tend to go backwards and we think backwards. Instead of focusing forward, our brain is wired to go and reflect backwards. And we're going to think about past experiences. We're going to think about children that we've had in the classroom in the past, mistakes that we have made in the past, right? And we got to see mistakes as opportunities for learning. Mistakes are opportunities for growth, all right? So, kind of what we have learned in the past and how we can take it forward right here. Y'all, connections are critical, especially children with special care needs. They struggle with meaningful relationships. They struggle with meaningful connections. A lot of times children with special care needs, they feel like an outsider. They feel like they don't belong. They feel like they're indifferent, okay? And let's just be honest. A lot of times that's how they're treated, okay? They get treated that way quite often. And when I say a lot of times that's how they're treated, unconsciously, they can be treated that way by other children, by adults that don't understand, right? Adults that don't have this specific training and willingness. It can be unconscious the way that they are treated. So those connections are critical, and they have to be meaningful connections. You're going to hear me talk about this so much today, that we got to make sure that we've got the eye contact, that there's physical touch, that we are present with the child. And most importantly, we're smiling, we're laughing, and we're playing. Okay? Now, the eye contact is probably one of the hardest parts right there, because some children with special care needs, the eye contact could be a trigger. All right? So we're going to have to ease them into that. But I'm going to show you some skills later on to help you with that. The child must be connected to the adult from the child's point of view, from the child's version of reality. Is that child connected to the adult? Do they feel comfortable and safe, right? Do they feel comfortable and safe with the adult? So we want to focus on that. You got to reach them before you can teach them. Eye contact, again, is practiced daily in a way that it doesn't shame or intimidate the child. Okay, so that's going to be important for you right there. And something that's really important for you to also remember, because this is what keeps the child in the higher centers of their brain. This is also what keeps adults in the higher center of the brain. It's, acts of service, all right? The children must feel as if they are in service to the other children, and vice versa. So we're going to practice this with, children that have special care needs and the other children that are in the classroom as well. So lots of acts of service where the children are of service to each other. And again, that keeps them in the higher centers of their brain. It keeps them from being in their emotional state. It keeps them from dropping into survival state. Empathy is the other part of that. The two most critical ways to keep someone in the higher centers of their brain: empathy and acts of service. So we want to practice and celebrate empathy daily, all right? But it's got to be genuine. Got to be genuine. All right? So great. Hey, Debbie, thank you so much for helping me out there in the comment screen. That was helpful. I appreciate that. See? Acts of service. All right. Yay. Debbie, you did it. You did it. You practiced an act of service. That was so helpful right there. And what perfect timing for you. All right. So let's just kind of talk about the definition of a special care need. And this comes straight from our child care minimum standards. And it matches the federal guidelines that are outlined in several different documents that I'm going to share with you later on as well. So a child with a special care need is a child who has a chronic physical, developmental, behavioral, or emotional condition or a disability, and who also requires assistance beyond that required by a child generally to perform tasks that are within the typical chronological range of development, including the movement of large and small muscles, learning, talking, communicating, comprehension, emotional regulation, might want to highlight that one, self-help, social skills, emotional well-being, seeing, hearing, and breathing. Or it could be a limitation due to an injury, illness, or allergy. So when we talk about special care needs, okay, and if you really look at this definition right here, a special care need could be long-term, but it could also be short-term. And if you really want to be honest, I mean, everybody participating in this training today, anyone that's watching the recording of this training, those that were not able to be with us today, but they're going to watch the recording later on, every single one of us at some point in time in our life, we've had a special care need. And we've needed a little bit more attention than we normally do, right? And again, if you look at this right here, every single one of us, the learning, the talking, the communicating, the comprehension, the emotional regulation, the self-help skills, the social skills, emotional well-being, seeing, hearing, breathing. We have all been there, y'all. We have all been there. Some of you might be there today, all right? And it might be temporary, it might be long-term. So I want y'all to keep that in mind, because when you have a child that comes into your classroom, we shouldn't be labeling them. We shouldn't be judging them, all right? We shouldn't be separating them, because they are just like us. They are just like us, right? And so kind of keep that in mind right there. I think that's important for you. I was going to say something, but I'm going to save it for another slide. All right. Sometimes I get ahead of myself because I get super excited. Yes. All right. Let's talk about the Americans with Disability Act. All right. So with the Americans with Disability Act, licensed child care centers and after-school programs are defined as private businesses, and we fall under the Americans with Disability Act. All right. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about ADA later on. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time with ADA because I have a whole different training that's based on that. So as a private licensed child care facility or an after-school program, we fall under the Americans with Disability Act. Publicly funded schools, so like public schools, they fall under something that's called IDEA and the 504 Rehabilitation Act, all right? But we must follow the federal guidelines under the Americans with Disability Act. Now here is where something has changed. Those of you that are in a church, those of you that are in a faith-based establishment, and your preschool program, your early education program, may be owned and operated by the church. So when your facility is owned and operated by the church, you could be exempt from ADA laws, all right? So in the past, there have been a lot of faith-based programs that have kind of held on to that because you're faith-based, you're exempt from following ADA. Now, since they've done the revisions with the child care minimum standards, and pretty much everything that was included in the Americans with Disability Act has now been added to the child care minimum standards, and you're expected to know and comply with the child care minimum standards. While you may be exempt from ADA, you're not exempt from minimum standards. Okay, so that kind of cleans it all up, that everyone has to meet these expectations. Everyone has to make these accommodations when they can. All right, and we'll go into more detail here in just a little bit. Also, something that we see in our child care minimum standards is that your center must have a policy addressing procedures for supporting inclusive services to children with special care needs. And this is a policy that you should have added a couple of years ago, that you must address this and that you must support inclusive services. I do have a sample policy on supporting children with inclusive services. You've got a QR code right there on your screen, but you can just go to my website, timthetrainer.com, and go to documents, and you can take a look at that sample policy. You can match it to what you have in your current handbook. If you need to make some adjustments, you've got that opportunity to do that. But you do need to be aware that, again, under the Americans with Disability Act, if you have a child that is receiving inclusive services such as speech therapy, occupational therapy, play therapy, these are some of the most common things we see, you are required to allow that to happen at your facility. All right. Now, basically what the law says is that you must comply and you must allow the child to receive these inclusive services. But as far as having a space, no, there's nothing in there about that. You just do the best you can with the space you've got. I've had it where they have used my after school room that's empty during the day to do inclusive services. I've had them do inclusive services in my office, but I had one school that was a smaller facility that they did it at the end of the hallway. We just found whatever space was adequate and appropriate for them to do their services, and you do the best that you can right there. Right? When your parents when the parents or guardians enroll the child into your program, there must be a statement of the child's special care needs. So this needs to be included in your enrollment packet, all right, or admissions packet, whatever you call it at your school. And the parent or guardian must indicate, all right, any limitation or restrictions on the child's activities. So in your admissions form or in your parent handbook, you want to make sure that you're clearly outlining what the child's activities, what their daily schedule is all about. All right. So if there are any limitations or restrictions, they need to list that out. All right. If there are any reasonable accommodations or modifications that need to be made for that child. All right. And with accommodations and modifications and accommodations are recommended by the child's health care professional. All right. It could be the child's health care professional or it could be their licensed therapist. That's who makes recommendations for modifications. It is not the parent or guardian. All right. So it is the licensed professional is the one that makes the recommendation for modifications. Let me go back to a couple of questions that I see on the screen because I don't want to lose them right there. It is a good idea to have the therapist whenever they're coming in to do inclusive services. Yes, it is a good idea to have them sign in and sign out. You always want to have record of anyone coming in and out of your program. So that is a very good recommendation right there. Someone is asking about being a registered home. All right. Even though you're at a registered home, you are still a private business. All right, and so because you are a private business, the Americans with Disability Act would still apply to you. So you got to think about it like this. Do you have customers? Yes, because the parents or guardians of the children are paying you for a service. All right, so that makes you a private business. So very good question on that one right there. All right, let's get back to the statement of the child's special care needs. Again, recommendations for accommodations come from the licensed professional. All right, if there is any adaptive equipment that is provided for the child, and instructions on how to use them. All right, when you do have a child with adaptive equipment, if it is something that it is safe and does not pose a health hazard for the caregiver to do, the caregiver has to be trained by a licensed professional. All right. But if it's anything, anything that is entering the body, basically, we probably need to talk about that one. All right. But anything outside of that, you can probably do. If there are symptoms or indications of potential complications related to a physical, cognitive, or mental condition that may warrant preventative or intervention when the child is in care. Now, you're going to get some of this information from the child's individual education plan or their IEP. All right, and so if you do have a child that has an IEP on file, you do have a right to request that, and you can suspend enrollment until you get it. All right, but that's going to be an important document for you to get a hold of. We'll talk about that later on in the training too. If the child has any medications prescribed for continuous long-term use, such as children with hyperactive disorders, may have prescription medication to help with that diagnosis, that needs to be disclosed right here. What I recommend that you do with your statement of special care needs is the way I've always done it on my enrollment forms is I will ask this as a yes or no question. All right. Does your child have any special care needs? Circle yes or no. If they circle yes, then they need to answer these questions that you see on the screen. All right. If they circle no, then you move on. But I like the yes or no question because sometimes when a parent or guardian is enrolling their child in your program, they'll just kind of leave this blank, or they'll write not applicable. And then, 6 weeks later, they go, oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, my child has special care needs. Well, now they've already been enrolled in your program. They've already been present for, a length of time. You've got some obstacles to work through right there. So I like to make it a yes or no question. When we talk about the responsibilities of the caregiver, when you're supporting a child with special care needs, child care licensing is going to expect that you provide care that is consistent with the child's habits, interests, strengths, and any special needs, including any special supervision needs or care. All right. So what you're going to notice with the changes to the child care minimum standards over the last couple of years, they're putting a very large focus on the individual child. And you, as the caregiver of the group, you've got to be familiar with each individual child and to be able to adapt the way you care for them to each individual child. And that includes their special care needs. When we talk about activities for children with special care needs, we got to make sure that employees and caregivers are providing children with special care needs with the accommodations recommended by the healthcare professional or by the qualified professional affiliated with the local school district or an early childhood prevention program. So that's what I mentioned earlier. The recommendations for accommodations come from a professional. It does not come from the parent. All right? And make sure you're always getting this in writing right here. If you do have adaptive equipment, they're going to expect you to accommodate that adaptive equipment if you can. Make sure that they're receiving their inclusive services. We talked about that. And ensure that activities integrate children with and without special care needs. So we got to make sure that they're inclusive of everybody. All right. And ensure that caregivers adapt equipment and procedures and vary methods as necessary to ensure that you can care for a child with special care needs in the natural environment. Okay, we're going to talk about when you can exclude as well. So that's coming up in just a little bit as well. All right, thank you, Debbie, again. You're being very helpful. I appreciate you. I wanted to throw this in here right here too, because I think this is really important for everyone to understand as we continue to go through this material as well. And this is some really cool information. Research has shown that children with disabilities benefit from learning along their, I can't talk all of a sudden, in a high quality inclusive setting alongside their peers. One study found that young children with disabilities and high quality inclusive services have larger gains in cognitive, communication, and social emotional development compared to their peers in segregated settings. So children learn best in inclusive services. All right, that's awesome right there. In addition, inclusion has benefits for all of the children, not just the children with disabilities. Young children without disabilities who participate in an inclusive classroom learn life skills such as empathy and compassion. Y'all, that's super cool right there. And I gotta tell y'all this story really quick because it's super awesome. And this just happened this weekend. Knowing that I was about to do this training right here. Way back, my son is about to turn 29 years old. So way back when he was 3, and he was enrolled at the facility that I was a director at. And we had 2 children with special care needs, 2 children with disabilities that were in the same classroom as my son. And they just kind of formed this really awesome bond. And they grew up together. And it was really, really cool and just fantastic, incredible families. Well, now, fast forward, my son is 29 now, and he works at a country club at an event center. And he just sent me a picture Saturday night. These 2 guys that had the special care needs and disabilities that were in his class when he was 3 years old were at this event at the country club. And it's just super cool with them coming back together. And he sent me a picture of the 3 of them, and it just made my heart so happy. And I thought, oh, this is so cool that I'm doing this training on Monday too. Man, you just never know the difference that people are going to make in each other's lives. And just that bond that those kids have had with each other, for 25 years now. Just really super cool. So I strongly, strongly support having that inclusive classroom so that the children can learn from each other, so that we can have that compassion, have that empathy, have that understanding. Because like I said earlier, every single one of us have a special care need at one point in time. All right, really quickly, I'm going to talk about understanding the Americans with Disability Act. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. I do have a whole training on my website called Understanding the Americans with Disability Act and Child Care Centers. So if you want more information about the Americans with Disability Act, I've got that training out there. But I also have a QR code here on the screen that will take you straight to the Americans with Disability Act website, and there is a wonderful document called Commonly Asked Questions about Child Care Centers and the Americans with Disability Act. So a lot of that information you can get right there. What you see on the screen right now, we've already talked about. Licensed child care centers and after-school programs are considered a private business. I used the example earlier for someone. If you're collecting money from a customer, that kind of makes you a private business. They also define it as a place of public accommodations. So again, that would, kind of fall into that. 504 Rehabilitation Act and IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that is for publicly funded schools, all right? And so private child care or after-school program does not fall under 504 or IDEA. There's a big difference between ADA and those two things. I say that because under the Americans with Disability Act, there are times that you can exclude a child with a disability from your program. We're going to talk about that next. Under 504 and IDEA, they have to accommodate. All right. So sometimes when you're having to deal with a situation and you're having to have a difficult conversation with a parent, and you may be in a position where you're having to exclude a child from care, it happens all the time that the parent comes back and they say, well, I got on the internet and I did some research last night and I read on the internet that you have to accommodate my child. Well, what they're reading is 504 and IDEA, okay? And that's when you politely and professionally respond and say, we are not a publicly funded school. We are a private business. We fall under the Americans with Disability Act, not 504 or IDEA. And y'all, this happens quite often right here. So when we have a child in our program with a disability or a special care need, we must make reasonable accommodations for that individual unless it creates an undue hardship. And you might notice on the screen, I have this in bold print because I'm giving you some language that I want you to have in your back pocket if you ever need to use it. All right. Now, again, the goal here is to make accommodations for the child, to see this as an opportunity to teach, to see this as an opportunity to make a difference, and we want to include the children in our programs. However, there may be some situations where group care is not the best situation for that individual child. So if you do run into these situations, these are words that I want you to be able to use. If it creates an undue hardship, and an undue hardship would mean financially your program cannot afford to make that accommodation. So for example, probably the most common undue hardship that we see is that the child needs one-on-one care. Okay? Well, you can't afford to hire a teacher just for that one child. Okay? And you cannot charge the parent a higher fee for that child having a special care need or a disability. So if they're financially, you can't make the accommodation, that would be the undue hardship. All right. I did just add some additional information right here. 1 in 5 Americans are affected by the Americans with Disability Act. It kind of gives you a little bit of another definition for understanding a disability is a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activity. And if you go to ada.gov, that website that's on that QR code, there's kind of like a little formula that you can use to determine, if something is a disability right there. But it's basically, is it going to substantially limit one or more major life activity? You've got to be really careful with this right here because, we talked a little bit ago about the statement for the child's special care needs. All right. And that is something that is required by child care regulations, that we get the statement of the child's special care needs. But when we look at ADA law, you cannot ask about the existence or how severe a disability is. You cannot ask if someone has a disability. You cannot ask how severe the disability is. Okay? So you gotta have to know the difference between a special care need and a disability. All right? And if you compare the two definitions that we've got, you can kind of see the differences. My recommendation to you is when you're having these conversations, avoid using the word disability, okay, and use the word special care needs. All right? So you've got to be careful with that. Yes, I see the question up on the screen. Can a center ask for the IEP? Yes, you can. All right. Now, whenever you do ask for that IEP, you're going to treat it like any other document with medical information on it. You're going to keep it confidential, and that information is only going to be shared with people on a need-to-know basis only. All right. So you do need to treat it as a very delicate document, but absolutely, if the child is receiving inclusive services and that child does have an IEP, then absolutely you should be requesting that, and you're going to follow the IEP as written. But when we talk about creating the undue hardship, when a facility cannot accommodate, the IEP is the most critical document right here. All right. And I've had situations where I've had to say to a family, hey, we need a copy of the most recent IEP. You have until Friday to get me this document. If we don't have it by Friday, we're going to have to suspend care until we get it. All right. And put this all in writing. Okay. Make sure that it's in writing. But that's kind of how we've had to handle that in the past. The other time, when we talk about excluding care, once again, a child care center cannot exclude a child with a disability from care unless the presence of that child would pose a direct threat to the health and safety of others or require a fundamental alteration of the program. Y'all, this is also in the child care minimum standards. When you look in the child care minimum standards under operational policies, all right, in the technical assistance box after that particular chapter, you're going to see this same language right here. A director may always have the right to exclude a child from care if there is a direct threat. And when we talk about a direct threat, that direct threat could be a threat to the individual child, a threat to the other children in the classroom, or a threat to the adults that are working in that room. Now, when you're documenting this, the direct threat needs to be very well documented and needs to be a reoccurring situation. All right? So is it a direct threat that is reoccurring? If it's something that just happens one time, you're going to have a hard time using direct threat for exclusion. It has to be something that is reoccurring. Okay? Now remember, all behavior is a form of communication. All behavior is an opportunity to lend a new skill. All behavior is an opportunity to teach. So while there may be a behavior that is a direct threat, let's look at what is the child trying to communicate, what skill is missing, what can we teach to try to avoid the exclusion. Okay? But this is where I talk about the adult willingness. The adult willingness has to be there because a lot of times I've seen programs that, they want to immediately go to the exclusion and the direct threat. Well, let's see how we can help the child first. So that's why I say it has to be a reoccurring situation. Okay. Now, you're going to put this in a priority standpoint, a priority category right here. How long can we work with a direct threat before we have to make that difficult decision? And it's going to be based on the behavior. For example, if you have a child that is a runner and they're running out of the classroom or they're running away from the program. I recently had one that the kid was literally climbing the fence and trying to get over the fence. That we had to keep on a very short leash, right? We got to address this behavior and we have to address it quickly, right? Because that is placing a lot of people at risk right there. So, you're kind of going to have to look at how severe some of these situations are. When we talk about a fundamental alteration, that would mean that you have to make a fundamental change to your policies or processes in order to accommodate that child, all right? So if that accommodation that is recommended by the healthcare professional or the licensed therapist, if that accommodation creates a fundamental alteration to your program, meaning you would have to change a policy or process to accommodate that child, that could be a reason for exclusion right there. Okay? Make sure that you're making your program available to individuals with disabilities. So we've got that right there. If you do need to make an exclusion, you need to do what's called an individualized assessment. There's no form or document called individualized assessment. These are basically your notes. It's your anecdotal notes. It's your journal. But you're going to call it, an individualized assessment on Leslie Easley. All right? And then you'll have your journal, your notes, your records right there to be able to determine if you can accommodate this child or not. All right? Like I said earlier, you cannot charge a higher fee. All right? Enrollment is still based on a first come, first served basis. And then children with disabilities and special care needs must be placed in an age-appropriate classroom. You can never deny a child the opportunity to learn based on their special care need or their disability. Now, when we talk about an age-appropriate classroom, you're going to be looking at the chronological age of the child, the developmental age of the child, the emotional age of the child, the physical age of the child. You got to look at all of these different characteristics to determine what is age appropriate. All right. But probably the most common deficiency we see on this one is that I see this with programs all the time. They say, we do not move a child into the 3-year-old classroom until they're potty trained. All right. Not moving a child into a 3-year-old classroom until they're potty trained, that could be an ADA violation, especially if the lack of potty training is associated with a special care need or a disability. All right. So that can't limit the child from learning. And when I ask programs, why are you not moving that child up until they're potty trained? Well, we don't have a diaper changing table in the 3-year-old room. Okay? There's nothing in the child care minimum standards that say you have to have a diaper changing table. Okay? You just have to be able to change that child in a sanitary manner. All right? It does not have to be on a table or above floor surface. So, you've got to be careful with that one right there. Okay? Especially if it's associated with a special care need or a disability. All right? One last thing right here on the Americans with Disability Act. There are medications that are protected under ADA law. These medications are examples of medications that are considered a reasonable accommodation to a special care need or a disability. So therefore, we do have to accommodate the child in these situations. So EpiPens, breathing machines, behavioral management drugs. If you have a child with diabetes, doing blood sugar testing, these are all examples of reasonable accommodations to a special care need So we do have to accommodate in these situations, okay? This isn't the entire list. These are the most common accommodations that are related to medication that we see. But there could be more than what you see right there. Yes, the nebulizer is a breathing machine. So giving that child that breathing treatment, that is considered a reasonable accommodation to a special need, okay? As long as it doesn't create a fundamental change in your policy or processes. Now, if that child is getting a breathing treatment 2 times a day, you can accommodate that. I was working with a school down in the Houston area a few years ago that, you know, this child needed a breathing treatment every hour on the hour, and it took, you know, 15 or 20 minutes to give that breathing treatment. Well, that was a fundamental alteration to the program, all right? And if that child was receiving a breathing treatment every hour, I think it was really safe to say that whatever his condition was, group care was not the best situation for him, you know? But that was a good example of a fundamental alteration to the program, okay? But yes, a nebulizer is considered a reasonable accommodation. All right. Again, I just really quickly want to talk about suspension and expulsion of children. Again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. I have a whole nother training on my website about suspension and expulsion of children. If you want more information on this topic, you can take a look at that video. But just before we get into supporting children with special care needs, I just want y'all to understand this one. All right. There was a study that was released in 2016, and it was a collaboration between the United States Department of Education and the United States Department of Health and Human Services. And they did an extensive study on what happens to children when they are expelled from their early education programs. And they released that data, like I said, back in 2016. I have an abbreviated version of that report on my website, if you want to take a look at that. It's really interesting right here. But just kind of know that, you know, misbehavior is a caution sign pointing to a missing skill. You know, punishing a child is not going to stop the behavior. The only way you will get a different behavior from a child is to teach a new skill. And teaching a new skill will replace that troublesome behavior. All right? And this is a direct quote from Dr. Becky Bailey, the founder of Conscious Discipline. But it's so critical. And especially when we're talking about children with special care needs, they can only use the skills that they have. They can only use the skills that are available to them at this time or at that moment in time. And a lot of times the skill may have been there at one point in time, but it's not accessible today. So our job as educators is to lend skills to children. And we have to typically lend skills to children at least 2,000 times in context before that child has that skill available to them, okay? So it's a lot of practice, a lot of practice, a lot of practice. Do y'all see where the adult willingness is coming in again? It's a lot of practice. You're not going to be able to practice the skill with the child one time and expect them to get this. So I have this up on the screen again. I've already said this once. You're going to hear me say this a couple of more times. All behavior is a form of communication. All behavior is an opportunity to teach. All behavior is an opportunity to make a difference. And you get that opportunity every single day. And you know, I always want y'all to remember that child, regardless of whether or not they have a special care need, that child was placed in your classroom for a reason. And it's not because the parent enrolled that child in your program. It's not because the director put that child on your roster. but a power much greater than all of us put that child in your presence. That child is in your classroom for a reason. You have an amazing opportunity in front of you. Don't deny or dismiss that incredible opportunity that you have. Okay? So kind of look at it from that way. That's a little powerful right there. So when we look at this report that was issued back in 2016, just a couple of bullet points for you right here. Young children who are expelled from their early education program, all right, whether it's due to a special care need or whether it's due to aggression or some other type of behavior, all right. Children that are expelled from our early education programs are 10 times more likely to drop out of high school, to experience academic failure and grade retention, to hold a negative attitude towards school, and that toddler that you kick out for biting is 10 times more likely to be incarcerated as an adult. All right? So, with that being said, we do have federal guidelines that we must follow, that in your policy manual, you need to address what parents can do to prevent their child from being excluded from care. We have a responsibility to meet all of these expectations that we've talked about so far, but then we also need to outline that for parents, okay? What can they do to prevent their child from being excluded? And y'all, it comes down to working together. We've got to have adequate communication and we've got to have cooperation. And the skills that we are practicing in the classroom must be consistent with the skills that are being practiced at home and vice versa. All right? So as we move in to supporting children with special care needs, all right, we've got to have that open communication. We have to have a plan so that we've got consistency. If mom and dad or guardian are doing one thing at home and you're doing something completely opposite, then we're setting the child back instead of moving the child forward. All right? So you want to make sure that you're addressing this in your policy manual. Also, when we have children that are expelled from their early education programs, they also experience a lack of social, emotional, and behavioral development, limited cognitive enrichment experiences that contribute to healthy development and academic success later in life, and expelling a child from a program could delay or interfere with identifying and addressing underlying issues. And the thing that I really want y'all to understand right here is that for children with special care needs and children with disability, most of the children that we have in our early education programs are undiagnosed. All right? And it's not because the parent is in denial. It's not because the parent hasn't taken them and had them tested or assessed. Most of the children in our early education programs are undiagnosed because they're too young to be diagnosed. All right? And we have to take that into consideration. But even though that child has not been diagnosed, we can still see the signs. And we can be proactive in supporting that child with their skill set. We don't have to wait for an official diagnosis or recommendation to come through before we can start successfully supporting that child. All right? As soon as you start seeing some of these indicators, we can start adapting and supporting the child. Now, the other thing that I want to address here, you have got to be very, very careful with the conversations that you have, both with the family and internally. All right? unless you are a healthcare professional or unless you're a certified professional working with early childhood intervention, you should not be having any conversations about a child's diagnosis or what you think they have or what you think they should be getting. All right? I was at a school last year, and I was working with this group of teachers, and like one person lit the fire and then they all started burning. But it's like, well, I got this kid in my classroom that has blah, blah, blah. And they're like, well, I've got 2 kids in my classroom that are blah, blah, blah. And they just start, and I was like, whoa. Time out. Have these children been officially diagnosed? No. Is there a treatment plan? Is there an IEP? Is there a statement of their special care needs? No. These teachers were writing this child's story. And I was like, y'all need to stop right now, because every word coming out of your mouth is a liability. Unless you're a healthcare professional, unless you're a licensed professional, y'all should not be having this conversation about what you think the child has and what you think the child should be getting or should be doing. All right? So we kind of had to hush that. All right? So be really careful with these conversations. Now, we can talk about how can we accommodate. We can talk about making these modifications. We can talk about adapting your activity plan to include the children with indicators. We can talk about their developmental milestones. We can talk about their anecdotal records. Okay? But anything that you think, the judgment conversations, y'all don't even go there. All right? Because, when we talk about the difference between judgment and noticing, when you notice a child, when you notice their skills, when you notice their abilities, when you notice the opportunity to lend a skill or to teach, noticing keeps you in the higher centers of your brain. That keeps you moving forward. Judging, when you judge someone, whether you're judging the child, you're judging the parent, you're judging the guardian, you're judging the director, you're judging another teacher in the school, judging comes from the brainstem. And that's your survival state. All right? So when you judge someone, you're trying to survive. And that's the lower parts of our brain. Nothing productive is going to come from that. All right? So we want to notice. Okay? Yeah, someone's saying, I always say our job is to help, not to hurt. Yes. And that's exactly that group that I was working with last year. That's exactly what I said to them. I was like, this conversation that you're having right now, especially with the tone and the body language that is associated with this conversation, is it helpful or is it hurtful? Is this conversation helpful or is it hurtful? And, we kind of took it from there. And the body language and the tone says a lot. Okay? All right. Some of you have seen this before, but I love this. And I just wanted to include this with our supporting children with special care needs. And I think this is a good reminder for anyone right here. But just kind of keep these 7 successful beliefs in mind right here. And if y'all want to take a picture of this screen so that you can save it or reproduce it, go for it, okay? But no child can make you angry, okay? No child can make you sad. No child can make you upset. No child can make you frustrated. You have to be in control of your feelings and emotions. All right? I'm not going to let this child make me angry today. I'm not going to let this child frustrate me today. All right? The only person that can make that decision is you. All right? Remember, those that you put in charge of your feelings, you put in charge of yourself. So if you allow that child to make you angry, if you allow that child to make you frustrated, that child is in charge of you. All right? And remember, the only person you can change is yourself. You can't change that child. You can't change that coworker. You can't change your spouse. All right? The only person you can change is yourself. But when we change ourselves, we have a profound influence on others. Okay? And as long as you walk into the classroom and you walk into the classroom to work with the children and you're wearing these glasses right here, okay? And you see that child as a pile of poop, or you see the group of children as a pile of poop, or whoever it may be, the parent, the coworker, the director. And as long as this is how you're looking at the situation, okay, what we focus on, we get more of. Okay, what we focus on, we get more of. So as long as I'm wearing these poopy glasses, then that's exactly what I'm going to get in return. So, with the adult willingness, are you willing to take these glasses off and see the situation different? Children must be seen through loving eyes. Children have to be seen different before they can act different. Adults have to be seen different before they can act different. And y'all, if you take anything away from today's training, please take this away right here. When you're working with a child with a special care need, that child has to be seen, all right, before you can move forward with them. But as long as you're walking into the situation with these glasses on, and I see a lot of early educators that do this, okay? Oh, I'm not trained. I'm not certified. I don't have the skills to work with this child. You could if you're willing. All right? So we have to see things differently. Are you willing to do that? All right. The motivation to behave comes from being in a relationship. When we are in a relationship with someone, they are more willing to meet our expectations. So I said at the very beginning of the training today, connections are critical. Connections are critical, and they must be meaningful connections. Meaningful connections wires the brain for impulse control and empathy. All right? And when we look at children with special care needs, they struggle with impulse control. They struggle with empathy. So those meaningful connections have got to be there. The eye contact, the physical touch, the presence of a safe adult, the play. All right? There are only two states of being. They're either calling for help or they're giving love. All right? They're calling for help or they're giving love. So when you've got a child in the classroom that is struggling, that's a call for help. Behavior, aggression, a meltdown, a tantrum, okay? They're calling for help. When they're meeting an expectation, they're giving love. Every aggressive act is an opportunity to teach, and it requires structure, nurturing, and presence. Again, if you take anything away from today's training, I really want y'all to take this away, and we're going to talk about this more later on too. Structure, nurturing, and presence. And our children with special care needs, they must have structure, they must have routine, they must have predictability. They also need to know that they're loved. They need to know that they have an adult that is present to keep them safe. All right? So you got to look at yourself in the mirror. Are you that adult? Are you that secure, healthy, optimistic attachment figure that creates a felt sense of safety in their presence? Or Are you the tiger trying to eat the antelope? Because a lot of times it's the adult in the classroom that could be the perceived threat of danger. All right? So we got to look at ourselves in the mirror sometimes. There is no such thing as a bad child. There's no such thing as a good child. We just have children with unmet needs. We have children with missing skills. Just like every single one of us, everyone that's participating in today's training, everyone that's going to be watching the recording of this, all right? There are times in every single day that we're missing a skill, all right? And a skill may not be accessible to us at the time, all right? Doesn't mean we're good, doesn't mean we're bad, doesn't mean we're troublesome. We're just missing a skill. All right? So that's where we've got to lend skills to each other. Children can only meet the needs of other children when their own personal needs have been met. Okay, kind of keep that one in mind right there. And all aggressive acts stem from a perceived threat of excessive pain. That could be emotional, mental, physical, social pain. All right? So your job as an educator is to really kind of focus in on that factor. What is that factor that's creating that behavior? What is the factor that is lending to the missing skill? You can go back. I did a training. I just re-recorded a training last month on positive guidance and discipline. You might want to refer back to that training if you haven't watched it yet, because we talk a lot about the factors that cause children to act out. Developmental needs and special care needs is a big one. All right. So we want to look at that right there. And this actually came from a conscious discipline training that I do, that I got from one of the master instructors with conscious discipline, one of the mentors. And then I've added it to some of my coaching adults trainings that I do. But this is very applicable to understanding and supporting children with special care needs and understanding and supporting children with autism. And when we look at the brain state model, and this is courtesy of conscious discipline, thank you guys for that. But when we look at the brain state model, you know, when a child or an adult is in their executive state, the prefrontal lobes, this is when they can learn, this is when they can solve problems, this is when they can meet the needs of others. The question that the brain is asking right here is, what can I learn from this? When a child, when the world is not going their way and they downshift into their emotional state, all right? And that is in the limbic system, which is right back here. Okay? The question that the brain is asking here is, am I loved? Okay? No learning can take place. They cannot meet the needs of others, all right? They cannot solve problems. They need nurturing. They need understanding. They need presence by a safe adult. Okay? Now, when they get triggered, whether an adult or a child, okay, when you get triggered and someone pushes your buttons, all right, we go into our primitive skills. We go into the basic survival techniques that we are all born with, and that is to fight or retreat, withdraw, all right? The question that the brain is asking here is, am I safe? And they're going to be seeking safety. There is a perceived threat of danger, and they got to get out of here. They either got to fight their way out or they're going to retreat. All right? Again, no learning can take place. They cannot meet the needs of others. They cannot solve problems. And both emotional state and survival state is unconscious. Okay? Most of the time, both the adult and a child, you don't even realize you're here. When you get triggered, you're always the last person to know. Everyone around you is going to be aware of that trigger except for you. All right? That's a child, adult, whoever. Okay? Now, what I've added to this, if you notice at the bottom of the screen right here, when you have a child or an adult that says, I can't, okay, Brandy, I need you to go to the sink and wash your hands. And Brandy responds with, I can't. That is a sign that she is in her survival state. What does Brandy need when she says, I can't? All right, she needs a felt sense of safety. All right, your job at that point is to create a felt sense of safety. Brandy, I'm here to keep you safe. Breathe with me. You can handle this. I'm here to keep you safe. Come with me. I'll wash my hands with you. All right? But anytime you have a child that says, I can't, that is a sign that they are seeking safety. Okay? When you have a child or an adult that says, I won't, meaning I've got the skill, I'm just not willing to use it right now. So when they say, I won't, all right, or if you say, hey, Brandy, I need you to go to the sink and wash your hands. No, I won't wash my hands. When a child says, I won't, that means they're in their emotional state. All right? So that child needs to know that they are loved. They need presence. All right? They just need to know that you're there for them, that you've got their back. Hey, Brandy, you've got this. You can handle this. I'm here for you. All right? So when we talk about, with autistic children, knowing the difference between I can't and I won't, this is really big right here. Are they in their survival state are they in their emotional state? Do they need, with survival state, they need structure, they need routine, they need predictability, they need a felt sense of safety. With emotional state, they need nurturing, they need love, they need to know that someone's got their back. And y'all might remember at the very beginning of the training, I talked about children with special care needs often feel like they are not included, like they're indifferent, like they don't belong, right? That's a very, very common, those are very common characteristics right there, all right? So it's very, very common for, children with special care needs and children with autism to basically live in their emotional state. And you have a choice. You can see them as being defiant when they say, I won't, okay? Or you can see that as an opportunity for you to be present, to extend that love. Remember, they're calling for help right there. I got a very good question on the comment screen. What about children that are nonverbal? Okay, y'all, being nonverbal just simply means that words don't come out of their mouth. All right? But trust me, they're verbal. All right? They just don't have sounds coming out of their mouth. But they have body language. They have facial expressions. All right? They have physical movement. That's how they're communicating. So, so many times I see teachers that get really caught up on, well, the child's nonverbal. Okay? No, they're communicating. Look at their body language right now. Look at their facial expression. Do you see their face? Their face is saying, I seem frustrated right now. Help. Right? Do you see their face? Their face is saying, you seem angry. Right? So there's communication. And look, even as adults, all right, there are moments when we go nonverbal. Okay? How many of you know people, and maybe it's you, that when the world is not going your way, hey, is something wrong? I'm fine. No, seriously, what's wrong? I'm fine. Is there anything I can do for you? I'm fine. How many of you, when the world is not going your way, you go nonverbal? Or you know people that are like that. But like, if I'm sitting here going, I'm fine, everything's fine. Even though I'm not telling you what is wrong, my body language and my facial expressions are saying, yeah, something's up. Okay? So, but this is where we've got to lend the skill. When you do have a child that's on the spectrum that does go nonverbal, or maybe they're nonverbal all the time, we're going to help practice different ways for them to communicate their needs. And this could be through visuals. This could be through sensory activities, right? Lots of different ways like that. The visuals are the best part, okay? Especially when you use that child as the model in your visual, it's going to really help out right there. Okay, good question. Thank you, Maria, for that question. Here are some facts about understanding autism spectrum disorder right here. It is a medical condition that affects about 1.5 million people in the United States, and this number is growing, all right? So it's very, very common for you to have children in your classroom with indicators of autism spectrum disorder. Okay, now remember, they may not be diagnosed yet, but the signs and the indicators are there. The moment you notice those signs or indicators, we can start supporting these children. All right. The term autism spectrum disorder describes certain brain development disorders that lead to difficulties in social interactions and communication. All right. Some people with ASD perform certain behaviors repetitively, okay, over and over and over again. Y'all, that is an indicator right there of predictability. They need that predictability. The brain is a pattern-seeking organ. It craves predictability. All right, it craves predictability. Autism spectrum disorder is 4 to 5 times more common in boys than girls. Okay, so that's really interesting right there. Around 1 in 68 children in the United States are identified as having ASD. So again, very common. Over 3 million individuals in the US. Okay. ASD symptoms and signs typically show up between 2 and 3 years of age. They may not be diagnosed until 4. All right. But toddlers, 2s, pre-kindergarten children, you're going to start seeing these signs. There's no medical way to detect autism, and there's no cure for autism. Early intervention is vital for children diagnosed with ASD. So that's why I keep saying this over and over again. The moment you notice an indicator, we can start supporting that child right then and there. The earlier we start intervention, the more productive we're going to be. All right. Now, Asperger's is a higher functioning. It's on the higher functioning end of ASD. Sometimes with Asperger's, they do not have delays or difficulties in cognitive or language development, but they do struggle on the social side of it. About 40% of people with autism have average to above average intelligence. So I'm sure a lot of you have experienced they're very, very smart. All right, very, very smart. Very exceptional skills with visuals, music, and academics. So right there's your encouragement. All right, this is how we can build their self-worth. We can get that joy juice, all right? That joy juice that we're constantly looking for. Those natural chemicals in the brain that make us feel good, which, by the way, the best way to release those natural chemicals in the brain is eye contact. So that's where we talk about the meaningful connections and the eye contact once again. Many children with ASD attend early childhood programs with their typically developing peers, and it's healthy for them to be in our early education programs with their peers. It's going to be helpful for them. Instead of isolating them, we want to have that inclusive classroom. That's going to help them right there. Here are some red flags that a child may be at risk of ASD. If a child exhibits any of these, discuss your observations with your center director and then have a formal conversation with the family, with your documentation, with your anecdotal records, with your developmental milestone checklist, all right? And you can have these helpful conversations. Now remember, you're not diagnosing anyone. All right, you're not telling the parent your child has ASD, all right? You're just saying, hey, we've noticed some red flags with their developmental checklist. Want to bring this to your attention. No big smiles or other warm, joyful expressions by 6 months of age and then after. No back and forth sharing of sounds, smiles, and other facial expression by 9 months. This is why we talk about, one of the most important games and activities that you can play in an infant toddler classroom is peekaboo, right? That classic peekaboo game, all right? We're working on attention skills, but we're getting them to have that back and forth sharing. Back and forth sharing, that's what we want. All right. Someone is asking, what if we have no support from the parent when the child has signs and indicators of ASD? All right. The parent is basically in denial. Now you got to be careful because you're writing the story for the parent. Okay. Don't write the story for the parent. We don't know what's going on in that parent's life. When you say that that parent is basically in denial, that's judgment. Okay? Focus on what you can do for that child. Focus on how you can lend skills. All right? And focus on the difference that you can make in that child's life and the time that they're in your program. That parent or guardian will come online when they're supposed to come online. All right? We can still provide, support. We can still provide, some referrals to that family. But they're going to have to accept this when it's best for them. And here's the reality of it. Having a child with a special care need is really hard for a parent. Trust me, I know from personal experience. No one ever wants to admit that their child has a condition. No one ever wants to admit that their child is a little bit different. That's hard, right? And so that parent is going through their own journey. Okay? But they will accept it, and they will move forward when they're supposed to do so. And just sometimes you just have to believe that. Okay? But focus on what you can do for that child and the time that you have them. Going back to some of the red flags, no babbling by 12 months, no back and forth gestures such as pointing, showing, reaching, or waving by 12 months, no words by 16 months, no meaningful two-word phrases, not including imitating or repeating by 24 months, any loss of speech, babbling, or a social skill at any age. These are red flags. And you're going to notice that these red flags that I have up here, these are infants and toddlers that we're talking about. All right? These are infants and toddlers, where if you go back to that previous screen, the signs and indicators don't typically start showing up until the age of 2 or 3. Right? And the diagnosis typically doesn't happen until 4. But you're going to notice that we're focusing on these red flags early on. Remember, early intervention is critical. Early intervention is critical. So infant toddler teachers, you got some responsibilities right here. All right? Help us out. Help us out. A child with autism spectrum disorder, they might have an obsession with certain objects. For example, a piece of cloth or a collection of toys, prolonged interest in common occurrences. So, for example, watching water swirl down the drain could be fascinating to them. Ritualistic behaviors, for example, arranging their food in a certain order. All right, these type of things. Repetitive behaviors, such as hands flapping or repeating the same phrase over and over again. All right, these are things that you might see. And allow them to do this. All right, don't try to break the cycle. Don't try to prevent them from having some of these characteristics. All right, this is what their brain needs to adapt. Okay, so we can build on this. All right, if having that collection of forks or having that a collection of a certain toy, if that is their interest, you want to find something that you have in common with them. So build on that. You really like this collection of forks, or you really like this collection of dinosaurs. All right, let's add more dinosaurs to the block center. Let's put a dinosaur over by the art easel, because art is a right brain activity. So this might be hard for them. Anything that is right brain could be hard. But if we put that dinosaur over by the art easel so they can try to reproduce it when they're doing art, build off those interests. All right, build off of that. So these are things that we can look for and do. So again, supporting the children in your classroom, structure, and a predictable routine. All right. When we look at our activity plan, when we look at our lesson plan, y'all, we've got to have an activity plan or lesson plan. That is something that's listed in child care minimum standards, and it must be followed. All right. Lesson plans are not meant to be a burden. They are meant to be a tool. They are meant to be helpful. But especially for children with special care needs, stick to your lesson plan. Stick to your daily schedule. All right? That is one of the most helpful things that you can do for them. When you give a child free play, when you just go, okay, kids, y'all just go play. Okay? Especially if the teacher calls in sick and you get moved into that classroom and it's not even your room. You're like, just go, destroy the room. I don't care. It's not my room. No. Once you give a child free play, it's almost impossible to bring them back. All right? We've got to have the structure. We've got to have the predictability. We can have child-initiated play, which is different from free play. All right? But they need that. They need an environment that is free of distractions. All right? A certain area of the classroom, like a quiet center, or something that we've used in my school is a safe place, all right, which is an area of the classroom that children choose to go to self-regulate. But for our autistic children, they kind of need that quiet, safe area so that they can go, because remember, we don't want them to get to the meltdown where mentally and emotionally they're spent. So if there's an area of the classroom where they can go and recharge, you know, they can go and regulate, they can go and calm. This is going to be really good for them. All right. Lots of verbal and visual reminders of what's about to happen. Lots of pictured schedules. So you can see on the screen, I've got a couple of different examples right here. This is the way we wash our hands. And step by step, you've got real life pictures of the children in that classroom, you know, going through the steps of hand washing. But with an autistic child or a hyperactive child, you might want to create a poster or a book just for that child that's got their picture and they're modeling the steps. That might be helpful for them. You also have a daily schedule here on the screen and real life pictures of what this looks like throughout the day. And like the picture that I've got up on the screen, you can see the little clothespins. So, you know, as you're progressing through the day, the children are moving the clothespin down. And have the children, and especially if it's a child with ASD, have that child move their clothespin down as they go through the day instead of the teacher doing it. It's going to be more meaningful and helpful if the child is doing it. Try to have an environment that doesn't have overwhelming senses. Excuse me. So smells, you know, I know some of y'all want to have your little Scentsy things or your air purifiers or humidifiers or whatever. If that is producing an aroma, that might be triggering for these children. All right, so we want to be very careful with that right there. Support their social skills, including practicing. How do we greet the people? How do we behave in social situations? How do we play with others? And remember what I said earlier. Children have to practice these skills at least 2,000 times in context. All right? So for your ASD children, lots and lots of practice. Lots and lots of practice. And that's going to be helpful for you right there. One second. All right. Once again, I've got the same little chart on here that I had before. I told you that you're going to see this a couple of different times. All right. To understand what the child with ASD is communicating through behavior, always ask yourself these questions. What was the child doing just before the behavior started? All right, so for an example, an educator is talking with the child before a small group activity. The rest of the children sit down, and then she begins the activity. The child with ASD starts to scream. All right, this may be because they wanted to regain the teacher's attention. Lots of anecdotal records here, y'all. Lots of journaling, lots of taking notes. And you're going to indicate not just the behavior, not just the activity that was happening right beforehand, but date, time, the children in the classroom, the adults that are in the classroom. And we want to try to narrow this down. Are they only having meltdowns during certain times of the day? Are they only having meltdowns in certain learning centers? Are they only having meltdowns when they're playing with certain children? Or it could be, are they only having meltdowns when certain adults are in the classroom? So these are all things that you want to look at and try to pinpoint. All right? What in the environment might have triggered the behavior, outburst, or tantrum? All right, again, they can be triggered by loud noises, bright lighting, sunshine, unfamiliar smells. All of this stuff right here could trigger. Again, understanding what the child is communicating through behavior, ask yourself, all right, again, what is the child trying to say through the behavior? The child might be communicating, there's too much commotion in this room for me. I don't want to do this. Or I want your attention. And I know sometimes teachers are like, these kids are just trying to get my attention. This child wants all of my attention. Well, remember the brain state model that I showed you earlier, right? When they're in that emotional state and they're saying, I don't want to do this, all right? I want your attention. Remember, in that emotional state, they need a safe adult's presence. So it's not so much that they want your individual attention. They just need someone near them that they know is going to keep them safe. All right? So keep that in mind right there. And then ask yourself, this question, can I predict when a child is going to behave in a certain way? All right? So again, that observing and documenting a child's behavior over a period of time is going to give you some answers. All right? So, for example, if a child repeats a sound repeatedly every day after outdoor time, this may mean that the child does not want to come indoors. So in this case, the educator can give warnings a few minutes before outside time is over so that the child has time to end their activity and prepare for the transition. I just did a training a couple of weeks ago on successful transitions. If you want to go back and watch that training, it's available on our website. But that is another very, very commonly requested training topic is how to handle those transitions, and especially with children with special care needs. I want to introduce you to a practice that we call DNA, and that stands for Describe, Notice, and Acknowledge. And y'all, this is so helpful with children with special care needs. All right? Describe, notice, and acknowledge. When you have a child that is triggered, all right, and remember they're in their survival state right here, reflect on what you see. So you're going to say something like, your face is going like this, and then your hands went like this. So describe what you see. And the reason why you do the describing is whenever you say your face is going like this or your hands are going like this, the moment the child looks up at you and you get that eye contact, the moment you get that eye contact, You pause and you take a deep breath and you download that calm. And that pause button does miracles. And then reflect on the feeling. You seem frustrated. And then you're going to acknowledge, reflect on what you hear. You seem frustrated. You were hoping that we would stay outside longer. All right? And y'all, it's not about getting it right. Take your best guess. All right? And if you're wrong, they're going to tell you you're wrong. But at least you're starting conversation and you're starting engagement at that point. That's the goal, right? And you want to say you seem frustrated. You seem upset. You seem angry. Don't say you are. If you say you are angry, you are frustrated, saying you are is judgment. And that's going to trigger them even more. When you say you seem, you're allowing the child to write their own story. If you say you are, you're writing the story for them. All right? And so you kind of do the best you can with this. But this right here, DNA, and y'all, this takes a lot of practice. Takes a lot of practice. But I think you're going to find it's going to be very, very helpful for you. So I just have a few examples right here that we can practice really quick. Okay? So you can see this little boy on the screen right here. He wants to get on the bus, and the bus is on TV. He's watching a little cartoon, and it's a cartoon bus. All right? So this is how you can respond right here. You know, your face is going like this. You get the eye contact. You seem disappointed. You were hoping to get on the bus. Okay? You can handle this. Breathe with me. All right, y'all see how easy this is? All right, just keep practicing. Keep practicing. This little girl right here just found out that the Golden Gate Bridge isn't actually golden, right? So you can see the little meltdown that she's having, curled up in a fetal position, crying on the ground. Your body is like this. You seem disappointed. You were hoping that the Golden Gate Bridge was golden. Oh, he does not want to come inside from the playground. Y'all know this kid. Y'all have seen him before, right? Your face is like this. You seem angry. You wanted to play longer. We'll do one more. Now I want y'all to look at this little girl's face right here. And when we talk about how important the DNA process is for children with special care needs, all right, look at this little girl right here. It's too loud in the hallway. It's that excessive noise is triggering her, all right? So this is when the caregiver comes back and they go, your face is like this. You get the eye contact. You seem scared. You want it to be quieter. All right? So describe, notice, and acknowledge. Y'all practice this. All right? It really works wonders. Practice some active calming techniques. Your children with special care needs need to practice a variety of different ways to self-regulate. All right? So you can find different breathing techniques to help that particular child. This is one right here that you can make on your own, just a really simple breathing tool. You can get pinwheels from Amazon or wherever you order supplies. Oriental Trading Company has them. Build that pinwheel. Just get some flowers from Hobby Lobby or Joann's or wherever you can get some crafts, and glue it or tape it on there. And then we do the practice where you smell the flower and blow the pinwheel. Smell the flower, blow the pinwheel. And that's going to be very helpful for your children as well. All right. Children with ADHD, hyperactive disorders. All right. Children with ADHD have behavior problems in many areas of life. It is simply the nature of the disorder. Children with ADHD do not mean to misbehave. Y'all, they don't mean to do this. They just forget to do what they know is right. All right, it's a disorder. They may hear what you say, but then immediately forget it. They may remember what you said, but then something distracted them and grabbed their attention. They may start the task you asked them, but then have no idea how to go about the steps of completing it. All right? Just lots of distraction right there. These symptoms of ADHD mean that you have to be practicing and lending your best skills all the time. So I've got some tips that I'm going to share with you, some tips for behavior that will ensure that you have a sound foundation for managing children's behavior. And remember, again, I've got this on here, the adult willingness is the key to success. See the world from the child's point of view. Your job is to teach, model, and practice skills. And y'all, again, don't write the child's story for them. Let the child write their own story. I was up in Rhode Island a couple of months ago working with a school, and there was this small group of teachers that were very really pushing back on me. And they were like, look, you don't understand, Tim. We've got this one child in our classroom that he will just go over and hit another child for no reason. And I'm like, no, there's a reason. There's always a factor. There's always a trigger. All right? No, not this kid. And he'll just go over and they'll hit another child and he'll have a turn to me and have a big smile on his face right after he hits them. Y'all. And I finally had to stop him and say, you're writing the story for the child. And as long as you continue to write that story, okay, then this is what you're going to get. Okay? Don't write the story for the child. Let the child write their own story. Okay? But there is always a factor. There is always a trigger. Okay? Your job is to teach, model, and practice skills. Okay? And I know that's hard, but that's what we've got to do right here. Practice positive intent, all right, and see the best in the child. Be proactive to any behavior problem every single day, and don't be surprised and don't be angry when they do it. All right, if you know that they're capable of it, expect it. But it's those preventative steps. It's being proactive. It's the encouragement, all right, the unity that's going to be important right here. Prevention is your first skill to practice. This is on your assessment. So when you do your quiz here in just a little bit, you're going to see this question again. Prevention is your first skill to practice. Any problem that can be prevented is a problem that doesn't have to be solved. Okay? If a child forgets to pick up their toys every day, instead of nagging them or punishing them or removing the privileges, just be prepared to coach and to mentor those self-help skills to that child. All right? Don't worry. Eventually, they will have the skills accessible. But also remember, they've got to be in the higher centers of their brain for those skills to be available. So there's two steps right here. They've got to practice 2,000 times in context. And for ADHD kids, add a little bit more to that. But then they also have to be in the higher centers of their brain for that skill to be accessible. Be wise and supervise. Children with special care needs must have consistent supervision, constant supervision. Otherwise, they may find themselves in frequent problem and dangerous situations. All right, so lots of good supervision. And remember, sight, sound, awareness, proximity, positioning, and knowing the energy of the room. Those are all the 6 characteristics of supervision. Know what the children with ADHD are doing at all times. All right, sometimes children with ADHD, sometimes adults with ADHD, sometimes they have poor judgment. Sometimes they do not anticipate danger or problems. So you're going to have to be one step ahead, and you're going to have to anticipate that for them. Create those visual reminders of the expectation and practice them often. Lots of visuals, lots of practice, lots of encouragement. Show children what they can do, and then show them what they cannot do. All right, so you can see the visual that I have here on the screen. You may lie on your side, you may lie on your back, but you may not get off of your cot. Okay, so for your ADHD students, let them know what they can do and show them what they can't do. All right, they're going to need this right here. When creating structure and routine, know what your boundaries are. All right, limit what you can and are willing to enforce. Y'all, this is so important. I know that y'all have been sitting here behind a computer screen for over 2 hours now, and your eyes are starting to roll in the back of your head. Trust me, I get it, I understand it. I'm here with you. Limit what you can and what you're willing to enforce. Otherwise, you're teaching the child that if you have too much structure, they only have to follow it some of the time. So when you're creating those boundaries, when you're creating that structure and routine, you got to make that commitment to it. All right? But as soon as you start making exceptions, you're lending that skill of exception to the child. All right? So what can you do and what are you willing to do? Got to keep that in mind right there. Maintain that structure at all times. Otherwise, you're teaching a child that they can gamble, and whether they will or will not have consequences when following the routine. Okay, so make sure you make that commitment to the structure and the routine. When you do need to enforce a consequence, okay, we like to encourage you to follow what we call the 3 R's. And I'm going to refer back to this quote from Dr. Becky Bailey. All right? Punishing children will not change the behavior. The only way you can replace troublesome behavior is to teach a new skill. So anytime you impose a consequence, is there a new skill being taught? Okay? Is there a new skill being taught? And the 3 R's of consequences. Is it reasonable? Is it respectful? And is it related to the behavior? All right, so reasonable, respectful, and related. So if a child takes a toy away from another child, all right, so what would be the reasonable consequence? Okay, well, if I were to say, you're not going to be able to play with that toy for the rest of the day, that's not reasonable. All right, because when that child goes down for nap and they wake up in the afternoon, to them it's a whole new day. All right, so a reasonable consequence is you're not going to be able to play with the toy for the rest of the morning. Okay, respectful. Are you publicly shaming them, or is this consequence between you and the child? All right, we want to keep it between you and the child. And is it related? Okay, if I were to say, if a child grabs this toy away from another child and they take it away, that's it. You're going to lose your outside time. Okay, you're not going outside. Well, number one, that's a violation of the child care minimum standards because we cannot withhold active play. But what does that have to do with him taking the toy away in the home center? All right, needs to be related right there. So those are your 3 R's of consequences: reasonable, respectful, and related. And when you make your consequences reasonable, respectful, and related, then we're lending a new skill. All right, so if this takes the toy away from another child, oh, your face went like this, and then your hands went like this. You seem frustrated. You wanted to play with the toy. You didn't know what words to use, so you reached over and you grabbed it. Next time, if you want to play with the toy, tap Tara on the shoulder just like this and say, "May I play with the toy? Practice with me now." And don't forget that, practice with me now. So you're going to tell them, you're going to model it, and then you're going to practice. So teach the new skill. All right. Last one right here with supporting children with special care needs. Ignore the minor, annoying, but not safety-related behaviors. So if you have a child that's humming, fidgeting, tapping their pencil, or other behaviors, sometimes those are best ignored. All right, you're not going to be able to stop them anyways, especially children with special care needs. Remember, this is just an indicator that their senses are a little off balance right here, and it's not a safety issue. So choose your battles wisely. Always model the behavior that you're expecting from the child. Remember, you're the safekeeper. You're creating that felt sense of safety, but they're looking at your composure all day long. You want to model what you're expecting from the child. Keep those records of the children's behaviors that you're working on. Keep those anecdotal records. Sometimes it is very difficult to tell if the skill that you are lending is resulting in change unless you're keeping those accurate records. Relying on your memory and your feelings of how the child is doing, that could lead to failure. And remember, when you're relying on your feelings, then you're writing the story for the child. Let the child write their story, not you. All right? Again, logging that behavior is going to help you notice trends in the activities, time of day, learning centers, social interactions. So this is a tool to really be helpful for you. And then last thing, celebrate success. Celebrate every single milestone, every single bit of success. We want that natural joy juice. We want that natural sense of belonging. We want that pride and accomplishment. And that's what they need. Last thing, in conclusion right here, all right, have open reflection on the skills that you have been lending. Talk about this with your school family when you get done with this training today, all right? Talk to your coworkers, talk to your leadership team, okay? What have we been lending well? What can we be better at, okay? How can we better support these children? How can we have better early intervention in our school, okay? Be that Q-tip. Quit taking it personal. This is not happening to you. It's happening in front of you. This is not about you. It's about the child. All right? And again, if you have any questions about today's material, you can message me from our website. You can call me. You can email me. If you need more information beyond the scope of today's training, again, message me, call me, email me. We are here for you. And if you need to make a giant Q-tip, like you see the picture of me right there, I have this Q-tip in my office because sometimes I have to remind myself to be a Q-tip. Quit taking it personal. It's not about me. It's about the child. It's about the teacher. It's about the adult, whoever it is I'm working with. All right. So I even need that constant reminder to be a Q-tip right there. Okay. Awesome. You've got your assessment that you're going to need to do now. There are quite a few questions that is related to the training today. So I wanted to make sure that you had adequate amount of time to complete your assessment on our website. We're going to put the link to complete your assessment in the comment screen for you. Make sure that your personal TechPeds training ID is on your profile on timthetrainer.com before you complete your assessment. If you have not set up a TechPeds ID, I encourage you to do that first. It's real quick and easy. And we've got some instructions on our website when you go to your portal where there's the field to enter your TechPeds ID. If you just click on the little helpful box right there, it'll give you the link to set up your ID. I strongly encourage y'all to do that. It's going to be helpful for you in your school. But then go ahead and submit your assessment, and you can get your certificate of completion for today's training. Again, I hope this was helpful. I really enjoyed presenting this material to you today. Such important stuff. But y'all, we've got this. You've got this, all right? And we can meet the children's needs. We can meet them where they're at, all right? And those children belong in your classroom. These children belong, all right? So you got this. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your morning. Some of you I will see again this afternoon. If I don't see you again this afternoon for our next training, have a beautiful rest of your day. Thank you so much for everything that you do in the early education industry. You are a proud early educator. I hope you're a proud early educator. And you might have noticed my Words Matter logo at the bottom of the slideshow. I've got a free training on my website called Words Matter. It's a half-hour training. We are not daycare workers. We are not childcare personnel. We are early educators. Okay, so I hope you see yourself as a professional. You are a professional, and so we celebrate that we are early educators. All right, everyone, enjoy the rest of your morning. I will see all of you very, very soon. Bye.